Most people are kind because they're trying to get people to like them. Our motivations are all about me then. If I can just be nice to you enough, maybe you'll like me and we'll have a friendship and, I'll have more people on my side. I can create a coalition of people that like me. But if it's all about trying to get people to like you, can I submit to you there's an easier way? Bribery. I mean, why don't we do that? Other than the fact that it's more expensive. Oh, that sort of reveals something, doesn't it? We want people to like us as long as it doesn't cost us too much. And this is what the whole discussion of forgiveness for us is revealing in our heart. As long as kindness doesn't cost me too much, as long as love doesn't cost me too much, well, then I can be that. I'll be kind, I'll be loving, as long as it doesn't cost me. But is that really love? That's the question. But what this means is that for most people in our culture, the difference between kindness and wickedness is simply the cost. How much is it going to cost me? Just marinate in that a little bit. The difference, for instance, in the parable of the Good Samaritan, between the priest and the Levite and the Samaritan, is that the cost of it, the cost of kindness, the cost of looking out for someone. You see, it's not that they didn't understand kindness. It's not that they didn't understand love. In fact, I think it's that they did understand kindness. The priest and the Levite took account of what it was going to cost them, and they found the cost too high, so they did nothing in the story. Because it cost them nothing to do nothing. The Samaritan, though, did not let the cost stop him. In fact, at the end of the parable, as Jesus tells the parable, at the end of the parable, Jesus says, he tells the innkeeper, take care of this man, and whatever you spend, I will repay you when I come back. You see, the Samaritan understood the cost fully and completely and was willing to pay the cost for kindness. See, there is a type of kindness that isn't really kindness. It's a kindness that does the bare minimum because it's constantly counting the cost of the kindness. There is a kind of kindness that comes from not from a reformed heart, but from a restrained heart. You see, I can restrain my heart and give you a form of kindness. The restrained heart is holding back. It's practicing kindness when the cost isn't too high. As long as the cost isn't too much, then I'll be kind. And it's constantly acting out of fear of loss, counting the cost in that term, or in the hope of reward, counting the cost in that term. See, a lot of morality out there is morality saying, I hope that people will see me being good, and they'll celebrate me being good. This is what the Pharisee does on the street corner when he prays aloud, trying to get the praise of men. Jesus says, no, go into your closet and pray that way. The restrained heart is engaging in something, in a selfishness, because that heart is not really changed. It's not really dealt with. It's hidden. And the kindness is expressed through external actions that appear kind, but are really about getting and keeping more for yourself of whatever it is that you value. So for the people that list in verse 31, that bitterness and wrath and malice and anger and slander, those kinds of people with a restrained heart, those things are all kind of seething underneath all the time because their heart is restrained. And so if they practice kindness and then they don't get what they expected in return, well, then they're bitter. They don't get what they return, well, then they'll slander you. They don't get what they wanted out of the relationship, well, then it's all your fault and you deserve whatever you get. You know people like that. I know you do. You encounter them. But if all that I have is a restrained heart, I have to keep coming back to Jeremiah 17:9. We've looked at this many times over the years. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? As if I'm trying to be a kind person out of a restrained heart, how can I truly be a kind person? If everything that I do is self-serving, is there any kindness whatsoever? Do I even know when I'm being self-serving out of a restrained heart? And if I can't tell the difference of when I'm being self-serving, then I have to question all of my motives that are done on my own strength. I do. See, this is why the heart has to be reformed. This is why the heart has to be reborn. See, real new life kindness is not natural. It doesn't just spring up naturally within the human heart. Because we're always, in terms of our sinful nature, always looking for whatever we're going to get out of life. This kind of heart has to be reborn in us. That's why Paul links all of this to forgiveness. Because the new life engages in practical grace. In our passage today, Paul is saying it's not simply enough not to have malice towards someone. It's not simply enough to not be slanderous in our speech. No, he's saying the new life gives birth to activity that reaches out with kindness and seeks to reconcile relationships. And the model that this is based on is the one who never fails. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children. You see, if we're imitating God, we're engaging in grace. And this is teaching us practical grace. You see, practical grace, we could look at that as, practical grace is just giving things, but it's not just giving things. It's not just maybe giving advice even, or giving money. It's not just even in giving deeds and serving somebody else like the Good Samaritan did. That we could look at that and say, well, that's practical grace in action. Practical grace is all of those things, but it's giving yourself so that others' lives are enriched or brought closer to an experience of Christ. It's the result of a heart that wants to see more for others than maybe they want to see for themselves. But in order for that to happen, you got to have a tender heart. Tenderheartedness, what is that? Well, the Greek word that is translated tenderheartedness is eusplanktoi. It means tenderhearted. Actually, literally, it means with healthy bowels. Not helpful. Greek is so dumb sometimes. But it starts to make sense if you understand how the ancients thought about where the emotions were contained. See, they thought the emotions were contained in your stomach, not your heart. We talk about it as a heart. That's actually kind of dumb. Because when you think about it, if something offensive happens to you, or if you get some deeply emotional feeling, like you get wounded deeply and emotionally, you feel sick in your stomach, right? You have a pit in your stomach if you're worried or stressed about stuff. We have butterflies in our stomach when we're nervous or excited or anticipatory of something great in our lives. Maybe the Greeks aren't so stupid after all. You see, anything that felt good, those positive emotions were expressed in terms of healthy bowels. That's eusplanktoi. But as the language developed, the word then became synonymous with compassion. In fact, that's how many translations render the word. Be kind and compassionate. But compassion requires an object. Being compassionate means that there's someone who needs that compassion in their life. That's what makes it practical. Somebody needs it. And that's what makes the sense of one another in all of those statements. Be kind to one another, forgive one another, be tenderhearted to one another. We could make those as independent statements of each other using all of those words. There's a mutual relationship where compassion is needed from each other. See, compassion is actually essential to friendship. You can't have a friendship without compassion. You're not going to stay friends with someone who doesn't show you kindness. That's true, right? If they're mean to you all the time, you eventually go, I don't need this, I'm going away. But what if you have a friend who never forgives an offense? Same deal. Right? A lack of compassion. If a person is bitter and all of that kind of stuff, you don't want to be around that kind of person. And so you avoid them. You see, friendship itself is an act of grace. It's a practical grace. Have you ever encountered a stranger, somebody that you never met before, and they just made you feel so welcome? They just enveloped you in love, and they were hospitable and kind to you, and you just felt like, this is a great person. And they weren't doing it out of any sort of obligation or duty. I mean, if somebody's been ordered to be kind to you and provide all of the things for you, you go, well, they're just doing what they're supposed to do. But if somebody's doing that out of just being kind, it becomes a practical grace. They've enveloped you in a friendship where you feel like, oh, I love this person and I hardly know them. See, practical grace wells up within two general reserves within a person: humility and confidence. Two different sources of strength within a person work together to bring about a practical grace, an extension of friendship and well-being to you, where you feel welcome and befriended. Now, you may have heard that and you're just like, wait. Humility and confidence, aren't they opposites? No. They aren't. Look at our ultimate example, which is Jesus, who is our ultimate friend. He befriended anyone who would have him. And when you look at Jesus' life, of course you see him as the ultimate example of humility. We see that from Philippians 2, which we've taught on numerous times. He emptied himself to death on the cross. He was so humble. He's the ultimate example of humility. And yet, when you look at the way he teaches, there is absolute confidence. I mean, do you really think that a person without confidence would be able to say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me? That's the ultimate in confidence. Do you think it's humility that drove him to redefine a whole slew of rabbinical teachings of the day? You have heard it said, but I tell you. No, that's confidence coming out. You see, Jesus is the most radically humble and yet most intensely confident person that has ever walked the face of the earth. And that's why he's the perfect model for true friendship. See, when there's humility, I'm not trying to look a certain way. When I'm humble, I say, this is who you get. This is what I am, warts and all. There's no spin. There's just simply openness and honesty about myself. But if I'm going to do that, I have to be ultimately confident about my identity. I can be confident in my humility because I don't have to win affection or praise or glory for myself. As if I'm not confident, then I'm trying to spin the narrative about myself. But when I'm humble and yet confident, I'm safe to expose all of my insecurities and failures because I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm recognizing that perfection is his work and that it's not going to be complete this side of eternity. That's the foundation for my humility, but it's also the foundation for my confidence. He is in me, and he's working in me, and if I follow his leadership within me, I'll become what he intends me to be. There's where the confidence comes from. Jesus is the model. He didn't wait for you to get yourself right before he forgave you. It was all grace. And so you can relax because it's safe to be honest with Jesus. That's what the befriending nature of Jesus is all about. It's safe for you to stop putting a spin on everything. So if you've experienced Jesus, you've experienced his grace in your life, you have experienced that befriending grace in your life. But do you give it to people? Do they sense it coming from you? See, that's the practical grace. We have grace within us, and now we have the confidence and humility to be able to extend it to other people. It's being so humble and so confident that you can forgive 70 times 7. I wrote in here initially that you can forgive as Christ forgave. I'm not sure this side of eternity if I can. I can try, though. I can keep giving my best effort at it. But I can let my friendship rest and not have to prove that I'm a friend by extending forgiveness over and over again.